Hello, my name is Igor and welcome to my Tech Fun, and I have another 3D printer review in this video, and it is Mingda Magician X with the very promising specifications, and if they are all correct then it can be easily become my new recommendation for printers for the beginners, but let's don't rush, so let's wait the end of the review. So just to mention a few specifications. According to the website, it is very easy to install. It has one touch smart leveling, auto leveling sensor, and it has ultra silent printing, which I will measure of course, and it has a friendly design, which means it has some belt tensioner, toolbox, dual Z-axis, and it is able to print from a USB drive or SD card, not micro SD but a regular size SD, or even from the USB-C. It has a double gear direct drive extruder. This means that properly we can easily print something like TPU or other flexible filaments. Now, according to the website, the maximum nozzle temperature is 260 degrees Celsius and the bed temperature is 110 degrees Celsius. Now, this makes me think that probably it has that Teflon line hot end where the Teflon tube touches the nozzle. And in this case, for Teflon, it is not recommended to print above 240 degrees Celsius before those toxic fumes for the longer period of time. But actually, if you want to print only PLA, PETG or ABS, you can do it up to 240 degrees Celsius. It's even better, so that's not a bad thing if you don't need those higher temperatures above 240 degrees Celsius, for example. Okay, so let's start with the unboxing. Okay, here we have some tools and some sample filament. Well, I'm not too big fan of this kind of sample filament because during the first printings for the beginners it can very easily roll down from the spool holder, so definitely I perform if it's sample filaments then some kind of minimal spool. It can be even cardboard, but definitely not my favorite, especially not for the beginners printers. Some kind of cover maybe for the toolbox. And this is the injection molded spool holder, power cable, and this is the gantry, the bridge with the installed hot end, so it is really pre-installed. So we have two stepper motors, and you can see now the dual Z-axis, and they are connected with the timing belt on the top, which is a little bit loose. And this is the base. Basically, this 3D printer is in two pieces and the box is empty. Few suggestions for the packaging. I'm not very big fan of this packaging because it is full of these small parts and they are electrostatic. I better perform this type. The first and main step is installing the gantry to the base. And first I have to screw from the bottom these two longer bolts. And the trick I often use in this case is to move carefully the printer to the edge of the desk and then screw from the bottom the bolt. Interesting solution they chose, so I have to tighten it with Allen key in this position because look how deep is this bolt, so I cannot tighten it normally in this position. But probably that's the reason why we have to secure it from the side too, with these two bolts. The filament holder can be installed on the left or right side. Don't forget, this is direct drive extruder, so the filament goes from here down into extruder. And basically after a few minutes I am already at the wiring. And actually I noticed that I have some spare parts, two bolts, but they are not even in this part list, so maybe there are some spare parts. And I'm starting with this cable which goes to the heated bed. Now actually I can see some holes, maybe those two bolts goes here, but in user manual it doesn't mention anything about these bolts. Interesting, looks like these two bolts goes here to secure this cable, but actually this is the locking mechanism already. The next is the connecting the two stepper motors for the Z-axis. Let's connect the X limit switch, probably it's this, the red one. X stepper motor. And arranging wires, which properly goes to the hot end. After cable connection, it already goes to the leveling step, but one important thing I want to mention, and it is not written in this user manual, and that's checking the tension on the belts and the V-slot wheels. Let's start with the timing belts. Now for our luck, on this printer it is super easy to set the tightening of the timing belt. This is a little bit loose, but only with rotating this wheel I can set the correct tension. And now it's good. And this is the X-axis, and this is also very loose. And by rotating this wheel I can set the tension. And now it's good. So the linear motion is solved with these V-slot wheels on X, Z and also on the Y-axis below the bed. And this means that on one side these wheels are fixed like here, and from the other side it's not visible here, but it is on eccentric nut. And with open end wrench we can rotate that nut, and with this we can set the tension distance between these wheels. This nut can be seen here on the Z-axis. Now these wheels on X-axis are set correctly, which is not always good, because if they are preset few months ago, then they will stay in one position and may have some micro deformation on that one spot. So I'm happier when they are not tight, and I will tighten it myself, because these here on the Z-axis are completely loose on both sides. I can very easily rotate with my finger. And now it's good. And same on the other side. And it's tight now. I cannot rotate or very hardly these wheels with my hand. And we have two more eccentric nuts on Y-axis from this side. And it's a little bit hard to access to them. And definitely they are not tight, so don't forget to tie them. Okay. Let's take off this from the screen. Let's start from the front. So here we have this touch screen. I will see how responsible it is when I turn it on. And great that we have here the USB full-size SD card and USB-C plug. So we have three options to enter the G-code to print from. Then we have this tensioner for this timing belt, which is super useful. This is also very useful. We have here the space for spare SD cards, for example. It uses this carborundum glass, which, well, for beginners I always advise to use some flexible sheet, because it's much safer, because the most dangerous tool is actually the spatula, and I noticed that actually we don't get it with this kit, but that's very useful when you want to remove the object from the print surface. But we will see if it works correctly. Actually, when you print the part, when it cools down, it will easier pop up from the print surface. Let's don't forget to remove the protection foil. I really like this ribbon cable, so it looks much better look to the printer, and when we don't have all those wires hanging around. And also this cable on the back side is great, so I can see it's really durable, so it will not break after a few months of using. It is good that we have the dual Z-axis, so we have two stepper motors, and also they are secured with this timing belt. So when the stepper motors are powered off, in that case you would easily move out of the synchronization, the two axes, and this keeps them in synchronized. But I noticed that this timing belt is a little bit loose and I cannot place a tension on it, so that's why I like better when I have alloy extrusion on the top. And that I can mount different things, even the different spool holders, or in this case the tensioner for this timing belt. And I noticed finally that this limit switch for y-axis is now pressed by some special part for it and not by the wheel, rotating wheel. I think I didn't mention yet, but this holder is super useful. I really like it. Very easy to rotate or to move the printer. Of course, depends how often you want to move it, but if you want, then it's very useful. A few words about this direct drive extruder. If you are not familiar, the direct drive means that the extruder which moves the filament is here, exactly above the hot end. This means the distance between the extruder and the nozzle is much shorter, and it can push better, with more precise retraction, and you can even print some flexible filaments. And if I remove this knob, I can open it so you can see what's inside. We have these gears on both sides. So this is geared pulley. This means it pulls the filaments from two sides. And I think it's also a geared. It has a gear ratio, but I cannot see the gears. And there is some plastic gear I can see from here. To be honest, it reminds me a little bit with that Bondtech clones. Not my favorite method, because if I want to release the tension to push the filament with my hand, I have to pull this arm, and this spring is a little bit too strong and too short, so I'm a little bit afraid that I will break this plastic, but maybe I can do it from the screen with the software so I don't have to push it with my hand. Interesting that I don't see the BL touch or some similar mechanical bed leveler, auto leveling sensor, but I can see some cell there, so I believe that it works like those new solutions which have this force sensor. So when we have a pressure on the nozzle, it will recognize it, and that will be the trigger for the Z. And about that leveling, it's a little bit hard to see, but this bed surface is fixed. There are no springs or rotation knobs, and that's good, because if you trust your auto leveling sensor, then there is no need for those knobs and the springs, because with that you always have to pay attention that from time to time check the manual bed leveling too. It's time to give it the power and to turn it on. It boots very quickly, and first is to do the leveling. And it will heat up the nozzle and maybe the bed, and then it will do the auto bed leveling, and it will store to the memory. It's starting with the leveling. This is the homing, and now just in case I will be ready to turn it off if there is any problem with the sensor. It looks like it had some Z limit switch here, and now it used the nozzle as a sensor. Okay, it works. I have to preheat it and insert the filament. And I will try to print something small from the sample filaments, but if you are a beginner, be very careful, because this may very easily fall from the spool holder. That's why I performed that to even the sample filaments to be on any kind of the small spool. Let's see this touchscreen. Preheat PLA to 210 and 75 the bed. Okay. And usually it's suggested to cut the end of the filament under 45-degree angle. Menu, extrude, and load. And this is what I'm talking about. So it's very easy to get filament jam, or maybe it will fall down. So definitely for the first prints, if you are printing from these sample filaments, you have to supervise it almost all the time. Let's see what we have here on this SD card. Print. Okay, from SD card. And I have 3 G-code files, and I already saw on the computer the ways is the shortest. And I'll be ready to set the baby steps if necessary. Maybe just a little bit lower. Probably it started with a raft, so this will be a little bit more than 1 hour, maybe 1.5 hour printing. And the printing is finished, and immediately I want to check the bed adhesion, which is great. So I will wait until it's cooled down, and then I will remove it, and theoretically it should be very easy. We will see. Confirm. Okay, but unfortunately the draft stay on the bed. And interesting, I found the vase which I printed on Mingda D1. And here I had a lot of problems. So for example, it had these waves on along the Z. And interesting, it looks like it's the same file, only we always had the problems with the cooling or on the top of this vase, and they decided properly to simplify it, so it's shorter and without this critical top. But that's fine. So for test print, and it was printed in 1 hour and 15 minutes. And it's really promising, and definitely I can confirm it is very quiet. So I will measure that. And now I want to add this printer to Cura. Add printer, add non-network printer. And from this list, this is not included yet, so I will just choose Mingda D2 and I will rename it to Magician X. And the dimensions are equal, so I don't have to change anything. It has a heated bed and also 1.75mm extruder nozzle. And then I'm loading the first object, which will be the calibration cube. And I don't want to change anything. I will just slice it and save the G-code to the SD card. G-code prepared, now let's try to print it. Calibration cube. I lowered the Z baby steps because I noticed on the skirt that it is too high. It's printing the calibration cube. I want to measure the noise from exactly half meters, and I'm using the same sound level meter as I did in my previous videos. And for you to be comparable, I will use this Sony camera where I will set the recording microphone to the manual level. So the raw audio is comparable with those from that previous video. Of course there are some peaks, but the main noise level is approximately 40.3 decibels, and I will add this to the table on my website. And now let's listen to the raw audio from the 3 quietest printers from that list. And now back to our calibration cube. I think I should lower even more the baby steps because it didn't stick too strongly, and I can even see that uneven bottom surface. Otherwise, very nice calibration cube. As I predicted, in Z-axis it is a little bit too big, so definitely I have to lower the baby step, the Z offset. I lowered even more a little bit the baby steps, the Z offset, so it will be safe for the next printing. And it's time to print the Benchy, and now you print it from this Polytera matte PLA. Where is the unload button? I know, looks like I have to unload it with my hand. Not a big deal, but... Finally I found what is that sound. I'm always hearing some click sound when it does the retraction. I'm not sure, does it has to be so loose or I should tie these bolts? And same on the other side. Now this may be done on purpose to give more freedom with the movement, because this not only has to lift the Z-axis, but this noise is quite annoying. It is very quiet printer, but that click noise during the retraction is a little bit annoying. Printing is finished. Let's check quickly the layer adhesion now. Okay, now it's good. I forgot to enable the camera when I removed it, so it was a little bit hard to remove it. But analyzing the first layer, I can see that the first layer is not squeezed down to the print surface. So yes, that's why I prefer better the flexible sheets. Now analyzing the outer surface of this Benchy, it is great. I can see some horizontal lines maybe here. Now the seams are a little bit noticeable that I would like to be, but I can see a lot of stringing. So I wanted to move to the TPU flexible filament printing now, but I think I should investigate a little bit more this. I will use different filament, and also I will a little bit raise the retraction. This Polytera PLA was opened more than a year, and this is the Polylite PLA, which I opened maybe 2 weeks ago, and I will try to print a stringing test with now retraction from 2 to 3 millimeters, and we will see if this one will be better. It's a little bit hard to see the nozzle from this protection here. It would be good to have some kind of opening here. I'm sure there are some YouTubers who would take the angle grinder and cut here the opening. Absolutely no stringing. Interesting, absolutely no stringing, not even one, and I did that basic mistake that I changed 2 parameters. Now I don't know is this a result of the big retraction from 2 to 3 millimeters, or the problem was more than 1 year old filament. But I will find out that not in this video, but when I will have my next filament dry review, I will use exactly this filament to see if I will get stringing, and I will try to dry it and see the results. No, I'm curious. I have to find out now. Is it a filament or the retraction? But it looks like the problem was the old filament, because this was printed also with 3mm retraction, so using the same G-code. But it will be a great subject for my next filament dry review. How can we save some old PLA filaments? And since this is a direct drive extruder, definitely I have to test printing some flexible filaments. Usually in this testing I print one of these corner guards, but I don't need so many. So this will be something different, but I need it in one of my future projects. Preheat TPU. And the printing is finished. I will analyze later this stringing. It sticks good, maybe too good. But with the TPU we are lucky because we can start with the peeling, and because it's flexible, so it's much easier to remove it compared to the PLA or something similar. Now the stringing with TPU is normal, we cannot avoid, and I have this stringing here because I enabled the random seams, so sometimes it starts the Z lifting here, but sometimes here. But stringing is easy to clean. And I have a 3D printed closed loop timing belt. This is JD2, and It looks like it fits perfectly. But how durable is it, and can we use it in some simpler applications? And that's a subject for one of my future videos. And now conclusions, and first I will talk about what I like with this printer, and then I will try to answer the question, is it a good printer for the beginners? And so what I like this direct drive extruder. It's really able to print flexible filaments too without any problems. I like that it has dual Z-axis which are connected with timing belts. Very comfortable that we have these tensioners on X and Y axis timing belts, and I really like that they take care about the wiring, so we have this ribbon cable, so it really gives a nice aesthetic looks to this. Of course this holder is very useful. I like that we have the tool holder, the spare holders for the SD cards, several connections here, so you can print with the full size SD card or from the USB drive. The touchscreen display, it could be a little bit bigger, sometimes it is hard to press the listing, but for this more comfortable is maybe using some kind of Allen key or something like that, something what is softer. And now to answer the question, is this new best 3D printer for beginners? Well, it's close, but few things which can be improved I have in this list. For example, for beginners, definitely I wouldn't recommend to use this carborundum glass, because the flexible sheet is much better, much easier to remove the objects. If the beginner user don't hit correctly the Z offset, it may stick to this surface too good and it's very hard to remove it. The sample filament, it should arrive on the spool. In manual, it should be included adjusting the V-slot wheels and the timing belts, because it's not mentioned and the beginner don't know that it has to check this. Again, if this is for beginners, then they should include some basic tools like these pliers, tweezers and spatula. Okay, it's very quiet printer, but unfortunately we have that click sound during the retraction because of that nut on the Z-axis. Cura profile, Mingda told me that they are preparing, so soon it will be included, the Magician X. Until that I'm using the Mingda D2 profile. And it's a little bit hard to see the nozzle from this holder, so it would be better if it's a little bit open, especially for beginner who wants to learn the printing. It is very hard to see that line during the printing. Okay, so these are my suggestions, really minor things, but they can improve the user experience. I don't know if I skipped something or you have some additional information, let me a line in the comment section. Thank you for watching and happy printing!